Hi, welcome to another episode of Art of Magic with me, your host, Jamie Salinas. As you can see, we're in a different location. I have just walked into the door of the worldwide headquarters of Magic Inspirations. Who is the proprietor here? Well, stick around and find out. Now, on this episode, we're going to talk about something very specific to mentalists and people who perform seances. What I'm talking about is a disclaimer. I am here at the worldwide headquarters, as I mentioned, Magic Inspirations. This is the home headquarters of Mr. Scott Wells, also the Magic Word Podcast. Be sure to check out his podcast, really great stuff. Now, we have a very special guest, happened to be in town. That's why I'm here at Scott's house. We just finished watching a fantastic lecture by a gentleman none other than Mr. Paul Prater. Now, if you don't know who Paul is, please take a look at his website. It's right here. You'll find all kinds of information about Paul, and you will quickly see he is a bizarrist, a mentalist, and a fantastic performer, as well as a lecturer. So if you are a magician and you get a chance to see him lecture, you definitely want to see his lecture. And now, today's episode, we're going to talk about the disclaimers for seances and for mind readers. I'm going to tell you my personal opinion, and that is I like to leave things gray. I like to allow those who believe to actually believe, and those who do not, kind of give a little subtle wink in a subtle way to let them know that, yes, I know we're just playing along and we're having fun. But I want to find out what Paul thinks, and more importantly, what the proprietor of Magic Inspiration thinks. So let's take a listen at what Mr. Prater thinks about this subject.
So I don't use a disclaimer. I don't think that a disclaimer is necessary, and partially it's because an actor doesn't go on stage if you're doing Macbeth and go, hey, by the way, no one's getting murdered tonight. People should understand, if they're in a theatrical element, that it's probably theater. And secondly, I don't use disclaimers because people who believe in the supernatural or believe in psychic ability are going to believe that you're doing psychic ability if you're doing your job right, which you should be. And even if you tell them it's all an act, they're not going to believe it's all an act anyway. It's what they believe. And for people who don't believe, of course, they're not going to believe even if you convince them of it. So I've found that using disclaimers actually discredits and undercuts the validity of what you do as a psychic entertainer.
Now, Paul, that's fantastic information. What I want to know is what happens when somebody comes up to you and they want to know, can you contact their dead relative? So how do you respond to that?
People have approached me and said, can you contact my dead relative? My answer to them is consistent. I tell them, no, I can't, first of all. And I say, no one can contact that dead relative except for you, because they live right here inside of you, and that's how you can speak to them, and that's the only way anyone can speak to them. And that's my standard answer every time.
All right, next up we have Mr. Scott Wells, again, the host of the Magic Word Podcast. So, Mr. Wells, you work closely with Banachek. You've been best friends with him. You've known him for a long time. I know Banachek has a very hard stance about giving out a disclaimer. He wants to really make sure his audiences know that what he is doing is not real. But so working so closely with him, why don't you tell our viewers what you think?
Yeah, Banachek and I have been business partners since 1987, and best friends then as well. And so obviously a little bit of his mentalism has rubbed off into my performance of magic. And a little bit at a time, I do more and more mentalism to the point where that I have done very many mentalism shows. And my thought pretty much closely aligns with his idea, and that is of saying that I use my five senses to create the belief that there is a sixth sense that you're actually using. And so that's kind of the idea that I like to have people think. Now, whether I actually say that or not, no, I really don't say that, give any kind of disclaimer at all. But I will kind of, through my performance, let people know that this is something that I am, it's not that I have powers, but that I'm able to do this by what you perceive that is being done, if that makes sense. So in other words, that they are seeing me use what would be a sixth sense, essentially.
Well, that's excellent information. I also want to know what happens when people come up to you, if you've ever had that situation and want to find out, is this real? Can you contact my relative?
I have had people who have come up and asked whether that psychic ability really exists and whether that I have that, because they are pretty much on the line of whether they want to believe it or not. And my personal belief is that I don't believe it, and I don't want someone's opinion to change to believe in that, because my faith, my religion is such that I don't believe in that. I don't want people then to think that there is something outside of what my religious faith would tell them that they should be believing, but they should find out for themselves what it is. So when people ask me if they have a belief system, then I will just say, no, I'm sorry, I really can't help you with that. But they pretty much come to the table to begin with a certain belief system. As I say in the seances that you and I have done together when I begin it, but I always say that for those who believe, no explanation is necessary, and for those who don't believe, no explanation will suffice. And the point being is that people have a belief system that they come in with, and I don't believe that I'm going to change them one way or the other. Same thing with those questions. Whenever they come to me with a question, they already have a preconceived idea of what my answer is going to be. So I'm feeding them back something just as I normally would as a cold reading, from the standpoint that they might think that they received the correct answer, but if someone else is listening to the same words, it's there's a duality there of where that one person interprets it this way, another person interprets it a little bit differently. So again, that I might just be telling them, though, that it's kind of whatever that your perception or your belief might be.
Well, as you can see, there are three varying points of view from the disclaimer point. Paul and I are probably closer on point than Scott is, but there's a lot of variances. So I want to know what you guys do. Do you give a disclaimer? Do you point out that what you're doing is not real? Do you let them believe? I want to know what you think, so please leave a comment down below. We'll talk about it in an upcoming episode. And speaking of an upcoming episode, I think it's time for me to get back to thinking about what we're going to do on our next episode. So until then, make sure you subscribe, click the like button, and I'll see you in the next video.